There's something incredibly captivating about witnessing a figure who's forged an entire profession on unyielding truths and intense arguments abruptly reveal a profoundly intimate side of himself. Sean Hannity, one of the most prominent figures in conservative broadcasting, did exactly that not long ago at 63, following years filled with political discourse, primetime programming, and attention-seizing discussions. Hannity lowered his defenses to discuss something infinitely more relatable than legislation or authority. Affection. His heartfelt admission regarding the lady he refers to as the love of my life didn't merely astonish supporters, it mellowed the rigid contours of a personality many believed they fully understood. But had they truly? I started washing dishes when I was 12, cooking at 13, then I was a busboy, a server, a bartender. For many years after that I became a painting contractor. I installed wallpaper, I built house frames, I worked in construction all the while I listened to talk radio constantly. And one day while I was in Santa Barbara, California, I discovered that the local college had Sean Patrick Hannity entered the world in Queens, New York in 1961, the last of four siblings in a tightly bonded Irish-American household. His dad, Hugh, served as a court officer, whereas his mom, Lillian, held a position as a corrections officer in a county facility. It wasn't an existence of opulence, yet it was one rooted in structure and neighborhood ties. Individuals who knew him during childhood described Sean as possessing a determined quality, the sort of tenacity that could either frustrate guardians immensely or propel someone toward extraordinary achievements down the line. Raised in Franklin Square on Long Island, he was simply another local youngster taking on various gigs, cutting grass, and fiddling with whatever items he could access. But it was the allure of radio waves that initially sparked his curiosity. During late evenings when other children slept, Hannity would dial into talk radio, entranced by how mere voices emanating from a device could spark nationwide dialogues. By his early 20s, Hannity realized he had no interest in a standard 9-to-5 routine. He experimented with numerous occupations, building sites, painting, even mixing drinks, yet his passion consistently pulled him back toward the concept of a microphone and listeners. His initial significant opportunity arrived when he secured an unpaid position at a university radio outlet in California. It was modest, rough around the edges, and without compensation, but for Sean it represented the world. From that humble California outpost, Hannity progressed to larger stations, ultimately anchoring programs in Alabama and Georgia. His tireless ambition drew notice from executives who recognized his capabilities, extending past radio. The moment was ideal. America was stepping into a period where political discussion formats were evolving into societal phenomena, and Hannity's daring approach was precisely what channels sought. By 1996, his trajectory shifted dramatically. Fox News, then a bold newcomer broadcaster, selected him to co-anchor a fresh series with progressive pundit Alan Combs. The program Hannity and Combs rapidly gained traction. Audiences were pulled in by the friction, two opposing viewpoints clashing each evening, and Hannity excelled in it. He didn't merely argue, he dominated the conversation to ensure his perspective resonated. Years afterward, when the Sean Hannity Show debuted as an independent venture, his tone became among the most identifiable in the country. He conversed with leaders, challenged initiatives, and occasionally invited debate. Yet throughout everything, one element remained unchanged: his vitality away from the lenses. However, Hannity wasn't nearly as vocal. Acquaintances and colleagues frequently portray him as unexpectedly subdued when not broadcasting, an individual who cherishes allegiance, seclusion, and spirituality. The image America encountered nightly was the presenter, but the person away from the set was profoundly contemplative. He would regularly discuss his beliefs, his relatives, and the uncomplicated aspects he still yearned for, from youth family meals on Sundays, the sounds of his parents, and the straightforwardness that arises solely from modest origins. To numerous who were familiar with him, it was evident that although Sean Hannity might flourish amid professional turmoil, what he genuinely desired was tranquility in his private existence, and that's precisely where his narrative veers into unforeseen territory. I truly believe that on my own, I am capable of nothing. I hold that every blessing we possess in this existence comes from God. Prior to the spotlight before Fox News, Sean Hannity was merely an aspiring radio personality striving to succeed, and it was in those initial phases that he encountered the lady who would shape a major segment of his biography, Jill Rhodes. Jill served as a reporter at a regional paper in Huntsville, Alabama. When she initially caught Hannity's broadcast, he would phone her seeking article leads, And before long, those work-related exchanges evolved into individual ones. They were both youthful, driven, and eager to leave their impressions. There was an immediate connection, one that swiftly blossomed into something greater. In 1993, they tied the knot. It wasn't an extravagant affair. It was uncomplicated, sincere, and brimming with the hope of two individuals prepared to confront life side by side. Hannity frequently acknowledged Jill as his stabilizing influence, the serenity amid his turbulence. As his profession expanded, so did their household. They greeted their first offspring, a boy named Patrick, in 1998, and 3 years later their girl Mary Kelly arrived. Those familiar with Hannity in that era often observed another facet of him. The dad who attended tennis games, the spouse who ensured his relatives remained connected regardless of his demanding agenda. Yet existing in the spotlight invariably extracts a price. The extended shifts, the frequent journeys, and the examination of notoriety started to erode their bond. As Hannity's trajectory soared, his union subtly began to unravel along the seams. He never addressed it openly, he never does, but sources near the pair indicate that years beneath constant observation gradually erected an unseen barrier between them. By 2019, after over 20 years united, Sean and Jill chose to separate. The split was completed discreetly, absent the theatrics or gossip that typically accompanies high-profile dissolutions. They released no resentful declarations, no exposés, simply two individuals who had built a life together opting to pursue different paths. But upon closer inspection, that quietude conveyed volumes. It demonstrated consideration not only for one another, but for their offspring. Even post-separation, Hannity and Rhodes persisted in raising their children with exceptional poise. Their youngsters stayed paramount, and associates note that Hannity continued to be heavily engaged in their worlds. For Patrick, his dad's involvement was steady, particularly throughout his tennis tenure at Wake Forest University. And for Mary, Hannity was the encouraging father who consistently carved out moments for her athletic and scholastic endeavors. Privately, however, that phase proved challenging for Sean. He was accustomed to command over dialogues, over stories, over societal views, but affection isn't controllable and grief can't be argued into submission. Those collaborating with him detected a faint transformation in that interval. The individual who previously occupied every pause with assurance started articulating thoughts more deliberately, pondering more profoundly. He began allocating additional time to introspection, relying on his beliefs and the serene aspects of his individual world. Companions mention he grew more guarded than ever, not withdrawn, but safeguarding. He ceased discussing partnerships entirely, evading even casual inquiries about courting during broadcasts. To many, it appeared as though Sean Hannity had concluded that romance simply wasn't suited for him any longer. Yet beneath that protected facade, another process was unfolding, a gradual, subtle reconnection with what affection might resemble. Upon a second attempt, he had navigated the ascent and descent of prominence, the peaks of accomplishment and the bite of sorrow. He had constructed a vocation that required his full focus and had discovered that not all elements of existence can be orchestrated like a transmission timetable. So when years afterward he mentioned discovering the love of his life at 63, it resonated uniquely. No, Sean Hannity is conservative. There's no facade here. I'm not Ted Koppel. I am an individual. It's labeled. This is a conservative program. I truly believe that without divine assistance, I could achieve nothing. I maintain that every element we hold in this realm is divine. After his union dissolved, Sean Hannity issued no sweeping proclamations or open declarations. He just persisted in his routine, appearing consistently each evening. Millions watched as he provided incisive governmental breakdowns and uncompromising opinions. Yet away from the set, his existence had grown subdued. Those closest to him report that he began emphasizing instances over achievements. He re-established ties with longtime pals, dedicated effort to his children's interests, and even pursued pastimes unrelated to governance or broadcasting. For someone whose days revolved around relentless cutoff times, that adjustment was substantial, but rest assured. Hannity's professional momentum never faltered. His program kept leading, often ranking as one of the nation's top audience broadcasts. His evening television slot stayed a viewership giant. Nevertheless, there was an aspect of him that felt altered. The intense delivery persisted, but beneath it lay an individual mastering equilibrium. He once casually noted that he had grasped the value of thankfulness, the subtle recognition for what genuinely counts: well-being, spirituality, relatives, and serenity, he no longer appeared driven to seek approval for a person who had devoted decades amid the whirlwind of American press. That awareness was transformative. In those calm years, Hannity established a pattern focused on reliability. Dawn workouts, moments in contemplation, and then directly into labor. Peers described him as nearly ascetic in regimen. He avoided public courting, shunned glamorous gatherings, refused to fuel speculation. He protected his seclusion vigorously, yet under that structured surface there remained a yearning, not inevitably for courtship, but for partnership. The type that makes you feel truly noticed when the recorders are absent. After all, regardless of achievements, nobody escapes isolation, and for Hannity, who had erected a stronghold around his inner world, permitting entry again wouldn't be simple. What he hadn't anticipated was that the forthcoming phase of his tale was already present within the identical structure, an individual who had traversed her own path of affection, grief, and endurance. You went through a separation, but your beliefs sustained you immensely. Yes, that was an extremely tough time in my existence, but we remain friendly and we co-parent effectively. My name is Ainsley Earhart, and I have been with Fox News for 14 years. Ainsley Earhart wasn't simply another broadcast figure. She was someone who had established her own identity in the rigorous arena of news reporting. A South Carolina local, Ainsley infused elegance and optimism into her efforts, rapidly advancing to become one of Fox's most cherished morning anchors. Yet behind that radiant expression and steady demeanor was a lady who had faced considerable sorrow. She had experienced 2 unions that ended and was nurturing her little girl Hayden alone. Her convictions had served as her guide, keeping her anchored amid life's chaos. In numerous respects, Sean and Ainsley's journeys paralleled one another. Both were seasoned at the same channel, both had endured open examination, and both were discovering what reconstructing private worlds post-grief entailed. The spark between them began subtly, based in camaraderie. They had been acquainted professionally for years, encountering one another in the Fox facilities, but at some point dynamics changed. Discussions that previously centered on labor started to become more intimate. Ainsley respected Sean's commitment, his devotion to his offspring, and his spirituality. Sean valued her resilience, her kindness, and her steadfast optimism. There was reciprocal admiration. It wasn't extended before coworkers started observing. They frequently moved in similar groups, occasionally attending functions jointly. Yet even as rumors started circulating, both Hannity and Earhart stayed silent. They neither verified nor refuted, choosing to maintain their bond away from attention. For Sean, that was intentional. After enduring the inspection of a visible union, he wasn't anxious to welcome the public into his emotions anew, but those nearest noticed how transformed he appeared. Near Ainsley, he chuckled more. He was more relaxed. She elicited a softness seldom visible on air. Their common principles formed the bedrock of their tie, beliefs, relatives, and the conviction that all occurs according to divine scheduling. They started worshiping together, frequently occupying rear pews, merging with the attendees. It wasn't ostentatious courtship, no premieres, no periodical features, but it was authentic. They developed a link founded on comprehension rather than display. When Ainsley launched her scripture discussion portions, Sean emerged as one of her strongest backers. He would commend her perspectives during transmissions and urge audiences to watch privately. He would confide in friends how greatly he respected her perspective, how she succeeded in remaining compassionate in an environment that prizes conflict. What united them wasn't contrast drawing, but resemblances harmonizing. They were both open personalities with guarded souls, both seeking authenticity in a sector constructed on facades. Their bond, although subdued, started deepening into something more profound, and while neither deemed it necessary to announce publicly, anyone observing could detect it. For Hannity, who had passed years concealing feelings, this link was restorative. For Ainsley, it served as evidence that post-sorrow affection can locate you unexpectedly, then arrive the instant that altered all. The admission that would dominate news and illustrate to observers that even the most protected souls can discover bravery in affection. Ainsley Earhart, you joined us at the congregation. First, congratulations on the publication. Thank you. It wasn't amid a governmental transmission or planned dialogue. It wasn't boisterous or theatrical. It was uncomplicated, the sort of instance that approaches unnoticed and endures. Sean Hannity, renowned for assurance and poise, spoke more gently than typical. His inflection wasn't the resounding conviction of someone upholding principles. It was the soft truthfulness of an individual unveiling a long-held secret. He started discussing appreciation, the individuals who remained during difficulties, then almost fluidly his language became individual. He referenced encountering someone who comprehended him. Someone present through peaks and valleys, someone he termed the love of my life. For an instant, the ordinarily passionate anchor appeared mortal, not the governmental analyst, not the press titan, simply a gentleman at 63 recognizing the wonder of renewed opportunities. Spectators were astonished. It wasn't that they doubted Hannity possessed feelings, it was that they had never witnessed him expose them so freely. He had always secured that aspect tightly, seldom referencing kin, never addressing bonds. He avoided naming anyone he didn't require. To those tracking his path understood precisely the reference, the moment, the softness in his phrasing. It all indicated Ainsley. And it wasn't solely the phrasing that rendered the instance impactful, it was the genuineness, the hesitations, the faint grin that appeared when he stated, at this point in my existence, I'm simply thankful I encountered someone who improves me daily. That statement by itself marked a pivotal shift, not only in public perception of Sean Hannity, but in his self-view. Vanished was the figure who once concealed behind labor, and instead was someone who had experienced enough to recognize that authentic power stems from openness. What's evident is that at 63, Sean Hannity has commenced a fresh chapter. For an individual who has invested decades analyzing national conditions, it turns out his most significant disclosure wasn't governmental whatsoever, it was individual. It concerned understanding that affection adheres to no schedule, that it disregards societal judgment, and that occasionally the finest aspects occur silently beyond the recorder's. Hey, everyone, incidentally, thank you immensely for including little old me in your wonderful scripture session. I could always benefit from additional prayers. We all reside in the finest nation God bestowed upon humanity. With Sean Hannity's admission, it extended well past his standard viewership. Those who had tracked him for years were surprised. There was no manipulation, no sensational proclamation, just truthfulness. It was uncommon to observe someone whose vocation rested on impenetrability display such softness. The press sphere responded swiftly. Some deemed it unforeseen, others invigorating, and for numerous admirers, it was relatable, rendering him more approachable occupationally. His candor didn't damage his standing, it enriched it. In an era where genuineness is scarce, the instance recalled that openness isn't frailty. For many long time followers, it drew them nearer to him. And for Sean personally, it appeared to signal an individual milestone. The reserve that once characterized him started easing. He didn't abruptly become transparent. He remains private inherently. But there was detectable warmth, a serenity derived from recognizing affection was no longer to conceal. At 63, he wasn't pursuing transformation, he was accepting actuality, one replete with thankfulness, partnership, and the subtle assurance from being cherished for his essence, not his actions. And that was arguably the deepest element of his admission. It wasn't merely an individual unveiling, it was an illustration that even those appearing monumental still seek identical basic realities, linkage, approval, and affection that endures. The first insight from his experience is that happiness can always be discovered. Hannity's admission occurred at 63, a phase when numerous presume their narrative is complete, yet his path demonstrates life keeps astonishing, that affection has no end point, and that delight can emerge long after turmoil subsides. The second insight concerns openness in a society where power often means restraint. Hannity's candor illustrated that real power occasionally resides in lowering defenses. By acknowledging emotions, he didn't forfeit influence, he acquired richness. He showed millions that displaying sentiment doesn't diminish resilience, it enhances it. Then there's the insight regarding thankfulness. Hannity didn't present his romance as triumph, he presented it as grace. He spoke as someone who learned painfully that achievement signifies little without sharing companions. That feeling of recognition after everything rendered his admission touching. And perhaps the key message is this: individuals evolve. The Sean Hannity observed 2 decades ago isn't the identical gentleman before the lenses. Now he's progressed from intense and unsettled to thoughtful and appreciative. If Hannity's admission clarified anything, it's that the human spirit doesn't cease. It continues aspiring, continues seeking, and occasionally, when the moment aligns perfectly, it locates what it sought throughout affection.